please do remember to keep rating those responses. So in our first week, we had a look at our advanced selections. We had a look at, revising things like our magnetic lasso tool, our standard lasso tool, had a look at the quick selection. We had a look at the magic wand in more detail. We also had a look at how to use the pen tool. So what we're going to do now is something similar but with layers. So we're going to revise our layers this week. We're going to have a look at the different types of layers available to us, but we're going to go much more granular with them than we did previously. We'll have a look at masking again, masking and selections now that we have a better understanding of selections, and we'll go back over our blend modes as well. I've gotten a lot of questions about blend modes since module number 1, so we'll have a look at blend modes in more detail, and then we'll be able to go on into our next lesson, lesson number 4. We'll have a look at doing double exposures, adding shadows and creating shadows, looking at dodging and burning, which we touched on very, very briefly in the last lesson, and how to do non-destructive dodging and burning. So with just a very quick revision then, first of all, with our pixel layer. So a pixel layer is our standard layer that we're going to begin with. Displays all pixel related data, so that's colors, images, photographs, anything that we're bringing into Photoshop. Likely we're beginning with a pixel layer. So let's get into Photoshop and explore our pixel layers in greater detail. So let's just start off by having a close look at this photograph. And when I say close, I mean very, very close. We'll just unlock our layer here. We're going to zoom all the way in. And when we zoom all the way in as much as we can, you could even keep, that's as far as we can go here in this particular instance, you can see each of the individual pixels in the photograph. And we look very, very closely at these individual pixels, we can see that they're all a single solid color. Or if it was a black and white image, they would all be a single solid tone. Okay, so that is why this is a pixel layer, because this image is made up of pixels. The amount of pixels in the photograph determines the resolution of the shot. Okay, so how those pixels are arranged is always the same. It's always going to be a certain number of pixels going down the height of the photograph multiplied by the length of the photograph. That gives us our total number of pixels. If we go up to our image, we can come up to our image size, and we're going to be able to see the dimensions of the image as it is originally. So it's 2200 pixels by 1468 pixels. Multiply those together, you're going to get the exact resolution of the shot, which in this case is 3,229,000 pixels. Okay, so it's a 3 megapixel image. Anytime we go over a million, it becomes a megapixel. So that's where we can see the size of our image and our image size. Now, obviously here you can also resize everything then as you prefer, as you wish. Okay, so that is our pixel layer. Now, if I were to start to edit this photograph, now let's see if I come up to my image and I start making adjustments here. Okay, so let's say I just make some level changes here. Now what you can see is that I'm actually applying changes directly to the image. So we can see we haven't made any duplicate layer here. I'm just applying changes directly to the photograph. If I click OK, that change is now applied. Say if I come back up here again, I start making more changes to it. So say for example I choose something a bit different. Sorry, I've just gone into my image size there again. We want to go into our adjustments. Say I go hue and saturation and I start to change the hue of one of the colors. Let's select our greens. There we go. So we're changing the colors of those greens, not dramatically. There we go. But what's happening here now, if I was to zoom back in very, very closely on this, we can see that we have changed the colors and the brightness, the levels of those pixels. This is a destructive way of editing. Okay, so what that means is that if I begin to save this image, and I were to open it and to save it and to open it and save it and keep making changes, the image quality is going to degrade because a JPEG file will compress every single time. We're also making direct changes to the pixels within our photographs, which is not ideal. If I wanted to undo the changes, I have to press Control Z. I have to keep cycling back until I get to my original state. And if I make too many changes, it's not always possible to go back to your original state. And this is where our second layer type comes in, which is our adjustment layer, which allows us to apply non-destructive adjustments, something that we have been doing throughout this course in nearly every single lesson. This means I can make changes to things like the color of the pixels, the brightness of the pixels, without actually affecting the original pixels in the base image. Okay, so if I just pop back into Photoshop, we should all really know how to make an adjustment layer at this stage. So I can come up to my adjustments. I can simply click off whichever one that I want. So we'll go to our levels here again. We'll brighten everything up. I'm going to make this a little bit more moody, just bring down the blacks a little bit more. And what I'm doing here is that anytime I add an adjustment layer to it, it's not affecting the rest of the pixels in the It's not affecting the pixels, the original pixels, okay? We're only changing, because it's a mask, like the masks, and we know what masks do, they either hide or reveal something. We're protecting those layers, okay? So I'm going to make this kind of autumnal, let's say. So we're going to change those yellows down a little bit. We'll just do a quick kind of change to this. We're not going to do anything too dramatic to it. Maybe just reduce the saturation down a little bit there on it as well. Make it a little bit more moody. And if I zoom in, you know, we can see that we are changing the colors of those pixels, but I could switch off those layers and we see that we still have our original pixels underneath. Okay, so that's our adjustment layer for the brightness and the levels. Okay, and then we've got our color layer there. You can see the changes being applied to them very, very quickly. So that's a non-destructive way of working, and that is why we use layer masks. Now, let's add another layer type to this. So the next thing we're going to do here, we'll add in a shape layer. Okay, so our shape layer, again, we've looked at these in great detail at this stage. We had a look at them back in the previous lesson as well. We were making shapes using our paths, and we can add graphical shapes to our images. Okay, so if we go back into my Photoshop, we're going to add in a shape here. So let's go to our shape option. We've got our ellipse tool here. We'll just click and drag. Let's do something very, very simple. A basic circle in the center. Drag it up a little bit here. Come back down to our shape. We're going to fill this. I'll fill it with a light blue. I'm going to have a dark stroke around it. Okay. And yeah, that looks okay to me. Now, with this, I want to reduce the opacity of the shape that I've made. So if I come over to the layer, I have it selected and I reduce the opacity, you can see that we're making it more see-through. We're making it less opaque. Now, the only issue here with this is also making the stroke around it see-through as well. It's making it less opaque as well, which I don't want in this instance. Now, I'm sure you've seen with our opacity, we also have this option called fill underneath as well. Basically, opacity will reduce the opacity of the object in its entirety, but a fill will only reduce the transparency, or will increase the transparency, I should say, of the fill color inside the shape. Okay, so as you can see, I can reduce it down. I'll bring it to about 50%, and we can see here that we have maintained our stroke, but we have reduced the opacity of the fill color in the center. So very, very useful to know. I'm sure you've wondered exactly what that fill option is underneath. And as you can see, there's not many times when you would ever use it, but in an instance like this, it's very, very useful. Okay, so the final thing then we want to do is we want to add a little bit of text. So we'll just pop back to our PowerPoint, and of course the final layer type then is our text layer. Again, we've had a look at this in previous lessons. And we're just going to introduce a little bit of text here, just to kind of to create a postcard, I guess. So let's just exit out of that there again, pop back into Photoshop and select our text layer. So we just click it off here, and we're going to go with our horizontal type tool here. We haven't explored these other options just yet, but there's no need to at this stage. So we'll just go with our horizontal type tool. We'll drag it across here, and as you can see, it fills it in with the lorem ipsum, etc., etc. So we'll just choose our font type. We'll go with something, I suppose, kind of script-like. Let's see. I don't want to spend all day looking for one. So we'll just go with, Monotype Cordova. I used to use that one a lot. Cursiva, I should say. And we'll just type in greetings. Okay. Now, so we want to change that font color. We'll just double click on it. We'll select a white here. Just for now, that's absolutely fine. We can also center it here by just clicking this off at the top. You could also increase the size of that perhaps just a little bit more. Okay, let's see how that looks. And that looks okay. Okay, so we could add layer effects to this as well if we wanted, because remember, we've created a brand new layer, and you could even add adjustment layers and so on to it if you liked as well. Now, when you've got your type layer selected, it is also possible to simply change the type of font that you want to use by selecting it off here, so you can kind of cycle through, see if there's one that suits better for what you're kind of going for. As you can see, there's quite a lot there. That Bauhaus one is kind of cool, isn't it? I like that one. But there's loads of different ones that you can kind of go through there. And if you're ever looking for extra fonts to download, remember to check out thefont.com. DAFONT.com, and there's loads and loads of fonts that you can use there to download and install. So definitely go through them, as I'm sure you'll find one that you are happy with. But that's our basic layers, our 4 basic layer types that we can see here in one document. We have our pixel layer, layer masks, we have our ellipse tool, our shape tool I should say, and then we have our text layer here as well. Now there's one thing I forgot to do at the very start, which was I should have made a duplicate layer of my background copy. You should always have a background copy to work from, so that you're always going to be able to go back to your very original layer. It's just a way of, just an extra step just to protect your image. But that's our final image for now. So let's just move away from that. There's no need to save this, so we can just close out and exit out of that. Let's move on to having a look at masks. So I'm just going to make a very, very simple shape to demonstrate. So I'm just going to make a very, very simple document here to demonstrate the absolute basics of a mask. So we're just going to, let's just create a square document, 900 by 900 pixels. That's absolutely fine. As you can see, it's transparent. Now, transparency means there is nothing there. You can zoom in to as much as Photoshop would allow you, and there's just nothing there. There's no pixels or anything like there at all. So we need to add in a shape, or we need to add in a color fill. So we can do that by simply highlighting our layer, which we have highlighted, come down to our options here, and we've got our solid color, and we'll just select, we won't select something too vibrant. We'll kind of go with a kind of a pastel kind of pink red. Okay, that's fine. Now, as you can see, when I've done that, it's actually also automatically created a mask for me as well. Okay, that's absolutely fine for now. Now, I'm going to duplicate this, so I'm just going to add in another one. But this case, I'm going to double click on it, and we're going to change that color, and we will change it to something that's close to blue. Okay, there we go. We click on that. So now what we are doing here, what we can see is that we have our kind of light kind of pastel blue with our layer mask. Now white reveals, black conceals. Where it can get a little bit confusing sometimes is that white reveals the layer that we currently have active. Okay, so if I were to use my brush and I was to paint away, so we just make sure we have our layer selected, so our mask selected even, and if I was to just paint away to show the layer below, what I'm doing here is I'm using black. Okay, so I'll just bring up the opacity on that because we're not at 100% there, but I'm using black to conceal the currently active layer, which in turn reveals the layer below. Then that's where it can get a little bit confusing, but white reveals, black conceals. So the white is revealing the layer we currently have active, and by painting in black, we're hiding that layer, and that means that it's showing the layer that's coming through below. Now, this is actually a good way to get used to your brushes. So generally, we're going to use black and white when it comes to our masking, but there is shades of grey. So, I mean, masking isn't always just going to be black and white. We can use different shades of grey in between. We can also use different hardnesses of brushes as well. So at the moment, I've got a very, very soft brush selected. I'm just going to undo that now. And if I just paint down, you can see I've got a nice kind of soft edge around that brush. Okay, if I click this down, I'll select a harder brush. I can select, as you can see there, much harder edge on it. Now, what you don't want to do with brushes is keep clicking them off like that, where you've got these kind of circles then that keep appearing. You want to try and do things in nice, smooth strokes where possible. Now, with our brushes, so I'm just undo all of that. Control Z, Control Z, Control Z. Do that a lot in Photoshop. It's probably the most used shortcut. But if I reduce the opacity down, so say I was to bring this down to 50% and I paint in here, what you can see on the layer mask is that we now have a grey. Okay, so it's not black, it's not white, it's grey, which means it's somewhere between hiding the layer we're currently on and showing the layer below. And as you can see here, we're not getting that kind of fully kind of pastel pinky red coming through. We've kind of got a mixture of the two colours. And it's by changing the opacity of the brushes that we use that we could refine our masking and blend our images even more. And when we bring in our different blend modes as well, things get a lot more complicated, as you can see when I start cycling through them, but we'll come back to our blend modes a little bit later on in this lesson. Let's have a look at applying this masking technique to an actual image. Now, so here we have our two images. We had to look at these a little bit earlier on in the slide. We've got our sky, and we have our image of a skier on a mountain. So what we'll do, we're going to make a very, very straightforward composite, just two images. So we take our image of the sky, we just simply click and drag over the image that we want to merge it with. Now, what I want to do is I want to still have a little bit of blue sky here in the image. So I'm going to reduce the opacity down here. Okay, so I can see the image coming through below. I'm going to just move that sky around until I am happy with where it is placed. Okay, so I'm happy enough with it there because we could get a bit of blue sky coming over the mountains, but we have a little bit of clouds there to kind of fill in that empty space that we had there earlier. Okay, so I can increase the opacity on that again. I'm going to drag this layer behind the skier layer. So we want to have the sky as the background. So we're going to just call this background. Get into the habit of naming your layers when you remember to do so. I more than often forget to do that. Now we select our skier layer. We can choose and create our mask, and we can then select our brush, B for brush. We've got a large brush selected here. That's absolutely fine. Because I have my black selected there on the brush, when I start to paint in, what I am doing is I am hiding the pixels of the currently active layer and revealing the layer below. Now, as you can see, the issue with this is that there's no real control. It's going all over the place. Now, you could be meticulous and you could get right into the edge and so on and paint that way if you had the time and the patience, but it would be very frustrating and likely is still not going to yield effective results. So what we need to do is we need to create a selection. So we just highlight our layer here again. We're going to choose our quick selection tool in this case, because really what we're dealing with here is a solid block of color. Now, you could absolutely use the magic wand tool here as well. I think a quick selection tool should do a relatively good job. Indeed it has. Now, there's some areas we just need to refine here. So just press the Alt key to switch to my minus selection. And there we go. Okay, so with that selection created, I could actually come back up to my brush here again, B for brush, and I could paint in. Okay, so make sure you have your mask selected, and I can paint in, and then we're hiding those pixels, and we're revealing the image below. Okay, so let's just have a quick look at how that looks. Okay, so we just wanted to deselect there, and it's not bad. Okay, again, it isn't perfect. You know, if we were to zoom in quite close, you know, it could be a little bit more natural. Although really it isn't that bad at all. But we can refine that edge a little bit more. So we're going to just undo all of that. With this selection, we are going to inverse it. So we come up to select, we're going to inverse that so we have our mountain actually selected. Then we're going to go into our select and mask. And here, as we've seen many times before, we can refine that edge. So we're going to just increase the edge detection here. We don't need to do it anywhere near as much as we do when we're using hair or something as fine as that, because we've got a harder edge. Okay, and I'm just going to brush along the edges here. Okay, now we don't want to go too much, because as you can see, if I brush in quite a lot, it begins to get quite dark here. Okay, what is actually happening there is that is end up going to become transparent, and we're going to actually see the sky appear behind the clouds, which is not what we want. Okay, so it might be a case where we don't even need to have the edge detection. We can reduce it down altogether. We just need to undo all of this here. So bring it down to just 1 pixel instead and go across. Okay, so let's just have a quick look at how that looks. We're going to output this down to not to a new layer. We want to go layer mask. I click OK and zoom in here. Now, as I said, you can see there's a bit of an issue here where it's almost becoming transparent. That actually doesn't look too bad, because it's almost like the clouds are rolling over the top of the mountain. Now, what we could do here in this case is we could select our brush, and we could begin to, make sure you've got white selected, your mask selected, and you could begin to paint in here, and you could show those pixels again. But if you want to kind of keep that effect, you know, we don't need to deal with just black and white when we're using the brush. We could actually also use grey as well. So if I was to just reduce the opacity here, let's say we go 50%. Okay, so that's halfway between black and halfway between white, and use it here instead. You can see that it gives me, it still gives that kind of effect of the cloud cover rolling over somewhat, but without getting rid of it altogether. Okay, so we can use this grey to kind of just go over the edges and to refine that even more. And this is the thing that we haven't really looked at when we speak about masking. We've just been mainly dealing with black and white, but we can use different varying shades of grey as well to create different effects. Let's have a look at that in a little bit more detail. So we can use varying shades of grey when we're blending 2 layers together. Now, As I said, toward the end of the lesson, we're going to explore blend modes in greater detail, but we can achieve somewhat decent results, good results, by simply using our masks and our brushes. So I have an image here, and I have this image of these ballerinas. Now, obviously, they're standing on a stage in front of some speakers, but I do want to try and give it this kind of old-time kind of effect. Okay, it's like a faded type of image. So the first thing then we're going to do is just going to rotate this image. So we can come up to image rotation, and that doesn't really matter if we turn it 90 degrees or clockwise or counterclockwise. So we can just click, we can drag it over, and we can drop as usual. Now, as we can see, it's a little bit smaller, so we just press Control T, transform, and we can drag out the edges. It does not have to be exact. Okay, now we can reduce the opacity of this down a little bit, get an idea of what the effect is going to look like. I'm going to just reduce it down to about 75% for now, for the moment. Okay, and we're going to switch that layer off. I'm going to also unlock this layer, and I'm going to turn this layer to black and white. So we can add an adjustment layer here. You go to our adjustments, we want to find our black and white option here. We've changed that to black and white very quickly. You can actually also go through some of your options here as well if you wanted to. I want to make it quite a contrasty one. So let's go with, say, a high contrast red filter. Okay, maybe a little bit too contrasty. So you can kind of toggle between those, whichever one you prefer. We'll go with just our standard kind of darker filter. I just want to kind of exaggerate that silhouette effect. I also want to make sure that this is only being applied to this layer, so we can just right click on this and create a clipping mask. Okay, so we activate our layer here again, and what we can do is we want to add a mask here. We just double click on that, make sure we have the right layer selected, of course, and this is why it's important that you label your layers to see what you're doing, and we can select our brush. Okay, so we'll need to use a large brush here. We have our opacity set at 50 for the moment. I'm going to reduce that down even more. Let's say we go to just 25 or so percent. There we go. And we can begin to paint in. Okay, now we need to select black, of course, because we need to show we need to hide the pixels on this layer to show the layer below. Okay, so you can see what's happening there very, very clearly. So we want to kind of just paint in, get a circular kind of effect going, because we want to have, I suppose, a type of vignette happening around the edges. And as you can see there on my mask, it's grey, a very, very light grey. So we're kind of keeping that texture, that tone, but bear in mind, if you go over it again, it's going to build upon it and it becomes even darker. So I want to, I suppose, give the old time effect where everything would be kind of packed in terms into the middle somewhat, and it then fades off a little bit more as it goes around the edges. Okay, now for maximum effect here as well, we could certainly do with cropping that image too, just to kind of crop out those speakers at the bottom. But you get the idea. There's no need to just use maximum black or maximum white. We can go with varying shades of grey to help us to produce different effects. And of course then you can toggle that opacity even more if you like. Okay, so we go maximum there, and that looks pretty good. It helps to kind of masks those speakers at the bottom. We almost kind of get this daguerreotype effect, this daguerreotype look. Now, so finally, to finish out the lesson, let's have a look at our blend modes and where they all fit into this to create effective masking. So our blend modes. So having a look at our blend modes. Our blend modes are essentially broken up into different categories. We have our normal, dark and light and contrast, inversion and component. We'd be familiar with normal. We've had a look at things like screen, multiply and overlays before. We're going to have a dig into all of these other ones much more as we continue on throughout this more advanced Photoshop course. Now,
if we were to kind of narrow it down a little bit more, the ones that we should be concerning ourselves with at the moment are darken, lighten, and contrast. So how these categories work is that darken will maintain any kind of dark colors or dark tones and remove any kind of lighter tones from the image. Lighten will do the opposite. It will remove any dark tones or dark colors, maintaining the lighter parts of an image. Then we have our contrast ones like our overlay, soft light, hard light. These will add varying levels of contrast to the image depending on the type that you use. Now, we will be coming back to the other ones like inversions and components. They're just not really relevant to us at this stage. Now, blend modes can be confusing at the best of times. And I mean, how they're worked out is very much mathematical. If you do want to check out how they're worked out, you can always check it out on adobe.com. Their help section will go into a lot more into blend modes. But let's have a look at them in action within Photoshop. So I'll just open up Photoshop here again, and I've got a very, very simple example here. We've got 100% black, 100% white, and we have 50% grey. Now, as we've kind of seen with our masking, when we use some grey tones, we're not fully going black, or we're not fully going white. That means we're not fully revealing, or we're not fully concealing. We're somewhere in between. And it's a similar idea when it comes to using blend modes. So if I select my circles here, my circles there, and I'm just going to zoom in quite close, we have normal selected already. Now you can see the edges here of the pixels. Things are getting a little bit pixelated. When I click down normal, this is where we have all of our different blend modes. We have this one called dissolve. As you see, it adds kind of a texture just around the edges there. It isn't the best example here, but it kind of does what it says on the tin. It gives this kind of dissolving type of texture. It's not really one that you're going to use very, very frequently. Normal is our standard. Now if I just zoom out here again, okay, and I select darken. As you can see, as soon as I start to use darken and any of the ones in this category, the white completely disappears. White is just gone altogether because we're using our darken ones. Remember, anything that's within the dark category will remove any kind of brighter tones, lighter tones, and if it's pure white, it'll be gone altogether. As you can see, when I move through it here as well, the different blend modes, the blend options, will have a different effect on the grey. Okay, so as you can see here, multiply makes it a little bit more transparent. Color burn allows the color from the behind to come through, but it's darker. We have linear burn, and we have darker color. And as you can see, it kind of actually changes that grey ever so slightly. If I move down into the lighting, we get the opposite then. As you can see, we still can just about see the grey, but it is almost completely transparent. Screen, we can see it a little bit more. As you can see, it's a much lighter grey, color dodge, linear burn, and so on. Will just get rid of any of the darker colors. Then we can come down to our overlays, and this is where things get a little bit more interesting. As you can see with our 100% black, it's quite dark, but we can still see the color coming through below. We have our 50% gray, which actually appears as a lighter color against the background, and our white is unaffected. Soft light, as you can see, has an impact on all of the colors here, or the tones I should say, because it is basically reducing the contrast of all of the tones. Hard light increasing contrast here, so maximum contrast with our 100% black and our 100% white, but not, and just really lightening our 50% grey, and so on. So you can kind of go through all of these. Now we don't need to worry about our difference, exclusion, subtract, divide. As you can see, they have kind of crazy effects on our tones, but these are more complicated, and we'll come back to these a little bit later on. But the general idea to take away from that is our darkened ones are going to be used if we want to maintain darker colors and tones. We want to remove the lighter ones, or we want to to have some kind of creative effect over the lighter ones, and vice versa with our lighting. And if we want to add contrast, we can go to our different overlays and soft light versions as well. And remember, we're not limited to just using one. We can create multiple layers, so I could duplicate my circles layer, and I could add different blend modes to each one of these as well to create completely different effects. Okay, so we can create multiple different versions. We can pretty much do as many as we like. There you go. So let's have a look at applying some blend modes to some actual images, how we can get creative with them. So let's open up a few different images here. We've got this wide angle shot of a house here. These kind of bokeh lights. We've got this kind of bonfire, some smoke here. Let's see what else. We've also got this nice image here, nice portrait, some more kind of bokeh, and finally this mug here as well. Okay, so lots of different images here to play around with, and let's start off with our smoke. And we need to find our mug as well, so it should have been a little bit better organized. So we can just drag this over beside our smoke, just drag and drop it in. Make sure that they're actually beside each other. Oh, it seems to have gone missing. Okay, look, that's absolutely fine. We could just click, we're going to take our smoke and we're going to drag it over to the mug. So we just need to unlock our layer. We can just drag and drop, and we can place it there on top of the mug. Now, as you can see, we have these kind of nice kind of bokeh lights here already in the image, but for this to work effectively, we are going to need to remove them. So if I just click and drag on my smoke, Control T to transform, and I drag it out to the size that I want, place it somewhere logically in the image. Okay, we'll just rotate it ever so slightly there as well, and I click OK. If I start to cycle through my different blend modes, you can see what happens there in the background. We still have our bokeh kind of coming through with the darken ones. Remember, darken is going to remove any kind of bright, light and white tones. So we need to have a look at our lighten ones. So we're going to have a look at like lighten, screen, color dodge, as you can see, not useful there. Linear dodge is okay as well. So if you wanted to actually maintain the bokeh there in the background, you could do so by just using one of these different blend modes. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to just quickly remove them as well. So I'm going to switch this off. We can just do a very, very quick fill on the majority of these. So we can just kind of click and drag over the area that I want to fill in. Make sure you've got your right layer selected. I can see that I don't, so we'll just deselect that. Click the background layer, and just click and drag. We right click, we want to go to fill. And this time we're going to use content aware. And content aware should do a decent job of just filling in this area and deleting all of those lights, or removing all of those lights. So it might just take a moment here for it to work, and there we go. It's done a relatively good job. Now you might need to get in a little bit closer to do a little bit more refining there on it, but for now I think it's okay. So if we switch back on our layer, now we can toggle through our different lighting options and find the one that best suits our purposes, which I think is just the standard lighting option. We can kind of just click and drag and move it to wherever we prefer is, wherever we think is kind of most logical in the shot. So that's a very, very simple composite to do using just light and blend mode. So we'll just close that one out. We'll also close this one out just to get things a little bit neater. And let's look at something a little bit more complicated. So here we've got a nice wide angle shot of an old kind of house. Looks like an old kind of frontier type of house. We can see here we've got a lot of space here as well, so we're going to insert this kind of fire just in the corner of the image. Again, you can just unlock the layer, click and drag and drop. So it's much larger than our other image, so we just Control T, we just drag in the edge to make it to the right size, and again you just logically place it in the shot.
Okay, now as you can see, we've got all of this dark background here. We don't want that at all. And before we go ahead and do something like masking it or selecting it to remove it, we could actually cycle through our different blend modes to see what effect works best. As we've seen, the darkened ones are not going to work here because they'll keep that dark background. And as you can see, it kind of creates that shape there of where the smoke and the fire was. So again, we need to go with our lightened ones. And as soon as I go to the lightened ones, you can see the different impact that they have. Okay, so again, lighten is probably going to be the best option to go with here. Screen maintains a little bit of that background, that black background we don't want. Color dodge, certainly not going to work here. And lighter color actually works very, very well as well. Almost better than lighten. It's very difficult to see the difference between the two. Now, where I can still see a little bit of differences in the grass here. Okay, so if I zoom in quite close here, so just press Z to zoom. Not working for me there. There we go. You can see we have a bit of an issue there. So this is when we would need to create a mask. We just create a mask on our layer, and we can then use the brush just to brush away some of that. There we go. So just very lightly around the edges. Okay, and that's how we can create another very, very simple composite using blend modes. And by now you should be kind of getting an idea of just how powerful blend modes are. You could reduce the opacity of this down a little bit as well to kind of blend it in even more. You could duplicate the layer and add another blend mode if you wanted to in this instance, but I wouldn't recommend doing that. I think one blend mode is enough. So really, really cool. Let's have a look at doing something a little bit more creative. So again, I'm just going to close those out for now because we just don't need them anymore. And then this final image, so we've got these really nice kind of bokeh effects here. And this last image here, we've got this nice kind of light coming in here from the right. And there's a certain type of film quality to the shot. I think it looks like something that was shot on a roll of film. So we're going to create something that looks like a little bit of a light leak, like a little bit of glare and a little bit of light leak on the image. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to unlock the background. I'm going to add some slight adjustments to it here to kind of give it a more retro type of look. So we're going to go with our curves. Now, the blacks in this are already quite muted, but I'm going to just drag up the blacks here a little bit to give it more of a faded effect. Bring up those the highlights just a little bit here as well. Okay, we can add another adjustment here. We're going to add a color balance adjustment here, just to add a little bit of warmth to the image here too. Okay, and that looks sufficient for now. Okay, now with both of these as well, I just want to create a clipping mask. Actually, it won't matter in this case because what we're actually going to do is we're going to place our bokeh and that over the image. So we'll go with this one here first. Just double click on it, click and drag. Try that again. Just unlock our background. Remember to unlock the background. Click and drag and just drop over. Okay. So we want to make sure that it's on the top. We can start cycling through our different options. And you can kind of instantly see what I'm trying to achieve with this already. Now, again, our darkened ones are not going to be useful here. The lightened ones certainly getting closer to the type of effect that I'm after. And we have our overlay effects here as well. So lots of different options there. Now, as you can kind of see here as well, it's quite severe with that. We can also reduce the opacity of this to make it less severe. And I think there we go. So we're reduced opacity with a screen on effect on a screen blend mode is working nicely there. So I'm just going to also make this a little bit smaller. So Control T on that layer because it's very large. So we just want to drag in that edge a little bit. And you could place it somewhere, up there in the corner. Again, we can see we've got a little bit of an edge there. So we can add a mask. Let's see, and we go to our brush. We can just kind of paint away
around that edge. Okay. We could get that kind of nice effect. I don't want to paint too much away there, so we'll just undo that. And we're just going to very much just basically get rid of the edge. Now, I want to keep a little bit of the glare here. I don't want it to be as prominent there because I want her features to come on through below. So we can reduce the opacity of the brush here as well, so that maintains a little bit of that light glare. Maybe you've gone a little bit too much there. Reduce, actually we haven't gone enough is what I should say, so we just want to reduce it down there a little. Okay, then we can add in our second one as well. So come back over, and we've got kind of, as you can see, a vertical one here. Make sure we unlock our layer, click and drag. I'm going to place this over towards the edge to really give this kind of as I said, like a light kind of leak effect, a light leak look. Okay, so again, we can kind of toggle down through our different options here, and again, it's going to look like screen is probably going to be the way to go. Okay, lighter color looks quite nice here as well. It's a tough choice there. We'll go with the lighter color option. I'm just going to reduce the opacity down here on it again. And you know, you could choose whether or not you want to have it on this side, the light kind of leak, or you could even have it in the middle of the image, so it was, and make it look like it was really exposed to the light when it shouldn't have been, or you know, you can place it right at the edge. Now I'm just going to reduce the size of that down there a little bit again to increase and get even more of that bokeh in. Double click on that. There we go. Okay, maybe it's a little bit much going on there, so we could just reduce the opacity down here even more. I actually think I'm going to go back to the screen option there as well. And again, you could always introduce a mask and kind of just paint a little bit more of that out. Okay, but I quite like how that looks. You could also kind of just toggle between the two of them and see which one you prefer. They do kind of work better maybe as just kind of single, you know, on their own, rather than kind of both of them together. It might be a little bit too much, but I mean, that's part of the creative process. The choice is absolutely yours. I'm just going to select my brush and then just paint out that again. So we just need to increase the opacity on that. We can just paint out that line. Okay, so as you can see, lots and lots and lots and lots of fun that you can have using your different blend modes. But that's it. I'll leave it there for now, and we'll just finish out the lesson. Now, so that's the end of another lesson. Well done on completing our first lesson on advanced masking. The next lesson, we're going to have a look and revisit double exposures. We had a look at them in lesson number 8 in module 1. We're going to have a look at them again. We're going to do a better job than what we did in lesson 8 of module 1. We'll have a look at, I suppose, simplifying things a little bit before building up to more advanced double exposures. We'll have a look at how to introduce effects layers as well. We haven't really done too much in depth with them, so how we can introduce shadows to add a little bit more depth and perception into our images. And we'll have a look at dodge and burn, something we touched on here, but we'll have a look at how to use dodging and burning. It's primarily used for your photographs, but it's also great for doing things like retouching and that as well. Now your challenge then for this lesson, I'd like you to use a blend mode with a mask to create any effect on a photograph. So to use a blend mode with a mask to create any effect on a photograph. So it doesn't matter what type of blend mode you use, whether it's the overlay, whether it's lighten, whether it's darken. But I'd like to also, if possible, to introduce using a mask with that as well. So you may use a mask and a brush to kind of reveal part of an image or to